Look at you! You just got bamboozled! Mirage is hands down the funniest legend in Apex Legends, but despite being a jokester, this guy is a holographic trickster. On the battlefield, he can beat you with one eye closed, two eyes closed, heck, he doesn't even need to show up. But there's so much more to Mirage than just some witty one-liners. Today we'll take a look at his backstory and give you some tips and tricks to bamboozle your opponents. Mirage is a guy who likes to stand out. He's a show-off who wants to make his presence known everywhere he goes and loves when people are talking about him, whether it's good or bad. After all, bad publicity is good publicity, right? We all know these types of people in real life, but they're usually not likable because they come across as cocky and arrogant. Elliot Witt isn't one of these people. You actually like him because he just exudes charisma and sarcasm. Growing up as the youngest of four brothers, he'd always try and get his mother's attention. He'd literally do anything to get his mom's attention, even if it meant making a fool out of himself, breaking something, or starting a fight with his brothers. From the get-go, he was never one to share the spotlight, and wanted it to be all about him all the time. His mom worked as an engineer, and would often bring new tech back home to work on and show her kids. All of this amazing tech really fascinated Elliot, who was a naturally curious kid, but there was just something different about the holopilot technology. For whatever reason, it was these devices that piqued his interest. While Elliot was rarely a serious kid and was always fooling around and making people laugh, this holopilot tech was the only thing in his life that he took seriously. From a young age, he'd spend time with his mom and learned everything there is to know about this illusion-creating tech. To say that he ended up mastering the technology is an understatement. The tech became a part of him. At first, Elliot used it to have some fun with magic tricks, creating doves out of thin air and then even making a duplicate of himself to bamboozle his family. Can you just imagine being able to make duplicates of yourself to troll your parents and siblings? Yeah, let's just say that his brothers must have been less than thrilled with his trickster ways, but his mom found it absolutely hilarious, which probably gave Elliot more of the attention he so desperately craved. It was a win-win for him when we think about it, and life was great in the Witt household, but all of his happiness wasn't going to last forever. The Frontier War turned Elliot's life upside down. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Titanfall lore, the Frontier War was a battle between the interstellar manufacturing company known as the IMC, the Frontier Militia, and other mercenary, pirate, and other private military groups along the frontier, which is where the Titanfall games and Apex Legends take place. Essentially, this conflict all started when the IMC sent their fleets to the outer reaches of the universe to exploit the rich resources of those worlds. Now, naturally, you're not going to like it if someone invades your home and steals your stuff. So the IMC frustrated a lot of people in the frontier, which led them to pick up their weapons and fight back, ultimately leading to the creation of the Frontier Militia and many other military groups. This battle has been at the center of both Titanfall and Titanfall 2, and it seems like there's been a conclusion 30 years later in Apex Legends, but we don't know who won. Whatever the case may be, all four of the Witt brothers enlisted in the Frontier Militia. After all, their homeworld of solace is right in the middle of the frontier, so they weren't going to sit idly by while the resources of their planet are threatened. Out of the four brothers, Elliot was the only one to make his way back home. All three of his brothers went MIA and never returned. We have no idea what happened to them, but Elliot and his mom, they feared the worst. So as a way of grieving, Elliot and his mom continued to develop holo devices, which brought them closer to each other than ever. There's no mention of Elliot's father in his backstory, which leads us to believe that his dad left his family early on, whether it's related to the Frontier War or not. Is it possible that his mom was a single mother raising four kids? That's one heck of a difficult life, which would explain why Elliot looked up to her so much. She struggled and worked like crazy to give a better life to her four sons, and now Elliot is all she's got. While Elliot was working as a bartender to make ends meet, he heard some amazing stories from those he served about the Apex games. They talked about all the fame and fortune that came with winning the games, which really got Elliot thinking. After all, he's a guy who craves attention and wants the spotlight on him. Not only would he become famous by winning the games, he'd become rich as well. That was a win-win scenario, and he was dead set on taking part in the games. But then he started thinking about his mom. He just couldn't leave her childless and possibly lose the one son she had left. But his mom had other ideas. She went up to him and gave him a set of customized holo devices, telling him to follow his dream. Aw, that's so sweet. Elliot's mom, honestly, seems like the nicest person ever. We all hope your parents are that supportive of your dreams. This all led Elliot to come up with the name Mirage to hide his identity until he felt like it was the right time to let people know the real him. He's now a legend of the Apex games, outwitting opponents and charming audiences across the frontier. He knows how to put on a show, and millions of Apex games viewers love him for it. We just hope that he didn't forget where he came from and at least bought his mom a new house or something. It's the least he could do for all of her troubles. He wouldn't have become an Apex legend without her. Mirage's mom, you the real MVP? We're not crying, you're crying. Wow. That backstory was really moving. It's something right out of a movie. In fact, we'd love to see a movie all about Mirage. There's no doubt that it would be entertaining. Switching gears, have you been hearing Mirage's voice and then going, he sounds so familiar, but I don't know why? Well, we might be able to explain it. If you've played any 3D Sonic the Hedgehog games, and we hope you only played Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2 because the rest are really bad, then you'll hear a voice similar to Mirage's in those games because Sonic's voice actor, Roger Craig Smith, also voices Mirage. That's a fun fact right there for you. Now, if you're a Mirage main like TILLHOUSE, then you know everything there is to know about the holographic trickster. Or do you? There's always more to learn about a character despite how much you believe you're an expert, which is where we come in. Let's start with Mirage's tactical ability, Psych Out. With this ability, Mirage can send a decoy in any direction he wants to, you guessed it, bamboozle his opponents. The hologram will do whatever you were doing as Mirage when activated. If you were running, it'll run. If you were crouched and aiming down your sights, the decoy will do the same thing. This is undoubtedly his most useful skill in the game, and it has a very short cooldown of 15 seconds, meaning you shouldn't hesitate to use it often. So don't be shy to throw a decoy out there to see if any enemies shoot it and reveal their position. It could also be used to get yourself out of a sticky situation. For example, let's say you're pinned down behind a rock. The enemy knows you're there, but you can send a decoy out of one side of the rock, and once you hear shots getting fired, run away on the other side. It's also important to know what your decoy can't do. For starters, if your decoy takes any damage, it'll instantly disappear, so it can't be used as a long-lasting distraction. If your decoy runs into a wall, a rock, or any elevated surface, it won't climb it or run around it. Instead, it'll just stop right in front of it. But if you're on an elevated surface and send out your decoy, it'll jump off of it without hesitation, so it's important to keep that in mind when you use Psych Out. Not only could Mirage drop decoys on foot, he could drop them in the air as well. When you're dropping at the beginning of the game, you could send 2 decoys in any direction to confuse the heck out of your opponents and then make them think a squad is going to land where they're going. Our favorite strategy is to drop your decoys at the same spot you're going to land, because many jump masters don't want to go where there's one other squad, let alone 2, so they might back out. Boom, bamboozled. This all sounds amazing on paper, but most of the time, especially if you're playing with randoms, it'll just confuse your team and then make them think that there's another squad lurking around. You definitely shouldn't bamboozle your teammates, so just let them know that those are decoys so you don't freak them out. The last thing you need is your teammates running around frantically going, I could have sworn I saw someone land around there. Mirage's passive ability is known as Encore. And if we're being honest, it's not that great. When you're knocked down, it drops a decoy and cloak for 5 seconds. The decoy is usually standing there, grasping for air while you turn invisible and crawl around. But it's not real invisibility. You could still be spotted by the light reflection, especially if you immediately activate your knockdown shield. There aren't many tips that we can give you to take advantage of this ability, but if you're near a ledge, we'd recommend falling off of it, because since you were invisible and wound up in a completely new area, you may have lost the opponents trying to thirst you, which is always a good thing. Even Mirage's ultimate ability, Vanishing Act, is anything but ultimate. It deploys a team of decoys to distract enemies while you cloak, but the decoys do absolutely nothing. They just stand there, which makes it very obvious that you're not one of them. It has a cooldown of 150 seconds or 2.5 minutes, and you're only cloaked for 2 to 3 seconds anyway, so you better make sure you're in a safe place by the time you become fully visible again. Just like his passive ability, Vanishing Act isn't real invisibility, as you could be spotted in the light reflection. Also, it's important to know that you can't use your weapons or heal while cloaked. None of this sounds very good, does it? Well, while it's far from the best ultimate ability in the game, Vanishing Act does have its uses. You could use this ability both offensively and defensively. On offense, you could use the ability to cloak yourself for a few seconds and then flank the enemy, kind of like Wraith's Into the Void tactical ability. The thing is, Wraith's ability is tactical, while Mirage's ability is an ultimate, which means Wraith has a much quicker cooldown, making it more ideal to save Vanishing Act for another more desperate time. It's best used defensively, especially if you're in an unwinnable situation. If you're caught in the open, or are trying to recover a squad mate's banner, you could just pop Mirage's Vanishing Act and then get yourself to safety. That being said, it's still a very flawed ability, but we think it could be fixed with one simple change: have the decoys actually do something. The cloaking time and everything else should remain the same, but making the decoys do literally anything besides just stand there will make a world of difference. Have one crouch walking, one regular walking, one sprinting, one firing their weapon, and one throwing a grenade. That way, it'll at least make enemies stop for a second and possibly even fire at some of the decoys. The way it is now, it's very obvious that they're just decoys, so by making a very simple change like this, it could make Mirage's ultimate ability much more viable. Mirage has been through a wild ride over the course of his life. Growing up in a happy family, the Frontier War turned his life upside down. He dealt with the loss of his brothers by growing closer to his mom, who decided to support him in his decision to join the Apex Games. If it wasn't for her, he wouldn't have developed the skills to dominate on the battlefield. In the games, Mirage is just as charming and witty as he is in his personal life. He's the star of the show, and we're sure he wouldn't want it any other way. Never change, Elliot. Never change. And that's what nobody realized about everyone's favorite holographic trickster, Mirage. Who do you main in Apex Legends? Do you think Mirage's ultimate ability needs to be fixed? If so, how? Let us know in the comments section below, and don't forget to subscribe to CBR for more Apex Legends videos. Thanks for watching.